What's going on? Today I'm reviewing this Autel ML529 OBDII reader. If you didn't know, OBDII stands for Onboard Diagnostics, and it's a system built into all cars manufactured after 1996 to diagnose the health of the engine, but primarily to ensure adherence to emission standards. Just about every sensor and electronic system in the car feeds its onboard computer, which uses that information to regulate air-fuel delivery, timing, idle speed, and control emissions, among other things. When a system fails or is out of parameters, the computer throws a trouble code, otherwise known as a DTC or diagnostic trouble code, and your check engine light illuminates to let you know that there's something wrong. If you're not car savvy, you might take your car to a mechanic for troubleshooting. But if you have your own code reader like this Autel right here, you can see what the issue is for yourself, oftentimes discovering simple issues like a loose gas cap that you can fix yourself, potentially saving you hundreds or even thousands. I've had this bare bones Autel right here for many years, but it's very limited in what it does and requires more work on your part to use it. This professional model right here has considerably more functionality and is more user friendly. For full disclosure, Autel was kind enough to send me this reader here to review for my audience. So thanks a lot to Autel for that, but all opinions are definitely my own. The reader comes in your standard box with an included carrying case. Inside, you'll find a quick start guide with instructions on updating the firmware, which should be the first thing that you do. The included manual is actually pretty helpful and will shorten the already short learning curve. It includes a mini USB cable for connecting the reader to the computer, and of course, your OBDII cable for connecting the reader to the vehicle. When holding the reader, you'll immediately notice that it feels of high quality. The buttons have a solid tactile feel and provide good feedback, and the entire reader looks uncluttered. It's powered by the OBDII port in the car, so there's no batteries to worry about, so it's also light. So let's put it to the test and see what it can do. So let me show you how this works. Right now we're on the main screen. I plugged it in to this car, and since the car wasn't throwing any codes, I disconnected the EGR connector, and I also disconnected the mass airflow sensor connectors to simulate some codes. When you plug in the OBDII reader, it's going to come on, but it's not going to communicate with the car unless the ignition is set to on or the car is on. So in my case right now, the car is on because it's very cold outside, so I just turned it on. And I'm going to go ahead and check for codes. So I'm going to hit check right there. Couldn't be easier. It's going to quickly go through the protocols, find the protocol that the car is using, and then link and start reading the codes. So right off the bat, it's giving me red exclamation mark right there. That's telling me there are hard codes that the car is throwing. So it's asking me if I want to erase previously stored data to save data from this test. I'm not testing. I could hit either yes or no. I'll hit no right there, and I'll go over that in a second. Then it's finding two modules. It's finding the transmission, it's finding the engine. I'm going to go ahead and hit engine. So this is your menu. You can read codes, erase codes, and do some other stuff that I'll go over in a second. But for right now, I want to show you how to read codes. Just hit read codes. It's going to give you two options, OBDII codes or enhanced codes. Enhanced codes, if you happen to have a Chrysler, Ford, or GM, this particular unit will actually read the enhanced manufacturer specific codes that those cars use. So that's great. I don't have any of those cars, so I'm going to back out of there and just read the regular OBDII codes, the generic codes. Alright, so right there is telling me there are 7 codes stored in the car. And you can scroll through by just hitting the right arrow. Okay. If you notice up here, some of these codes say pending, some of them say permanent, and some of them say stored. The stored codes are codes that the car had at one point. It may not necessarily have them now, but the car had those codes at one point and it hasn't cleared them yet. The car hasn't cleared them on its own yet. The pending codes are codes that the car had at one point, but it's not sure if it's actually a problem yet. It wants to go through another drive cycle to see if the problem persists. Now, if I do another drive cycle and this problem persists, then that pending code right there will become a stored code. And finally, right here you have the permanent codes. I'll go over the permanent codes in a minute because I want to show you something about them. For any one of these codes, you can hit the question mark button right there to read information about it. That's really neat. So on the fly, you can just hit question mark and it'll give you a more specific description of that code and what the problem could be. So right here it says short and mass airflow circuit. It says improper voltage at mass airflow sensor and faulty mass airflow sensor. Okay, so we know that all of those are applicable because I actually disconnected the mass airflow sensor. So I can hit back out of there, and That's another code related to the mass airflow sensor. I can hit the question mark. If I'm actually troubleshooting this car, that's the first thing that I would do. I would check the mass airflow sensor. I would check the plug, make sure the plug is good. I would take the mass airflow sensor out and I would clean it with mass airflow cleaner. These are simple things that you can do to troubleshoot before you move on to more expensive things. So we know that the car had at one point or another several codes. Okay, so now I want to clear those codes. I'm actually going to turn off the car because the car has to be off for you to do that, but you still have to have the ignition switch on. So I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to back out of here and I'm going to hit erase codes. Okay, and I'm going to erase the OBD codes that we just read. It asked me if I'm sure, so I'm going to hit yes, I'm sure. Okay, so it says erase codes command sent. Perform read codes function to verify. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to press the escape key. Before I do that, I'm going to start the car. I'm going to hit back and I'm going to go back up to read codes. And I'm going to read again OBD codes. Wait a second. So now if you notice, it's only got 2 codes instead of the 7. So it erased all of the stored codes and all of the pending codes. These permanent codes that you see right there, you cannot erase those codes with any code readers. The only way those codes go away is by actually taking the car through a complete drive cycle. The reason why there's permanent codes is because it's the law. They got smart to people actually buying code readers and deleting the codes and then taking their cars for a yearly inspection and then passing when the car was actually not ready to pass an inspection. So let me show you something. I'm going to go back to the main screen here and show you something very neat. So we have right here an emissions ready test, or you also have this button right here that will do it on the fly if you just hit the button. So if you hit that ready test or this button right here, it'll conduct a quick complete check of the car and it's going to show you the emissions readiness of the car. This car, for example, right now, obviously I cleared those codes, but I have 4 systems that are not ready. So these 4 systems that have X's have to go through a complete drive cycle to clear themselves before this car will pass an emissions test. So if my car needed an inspection and I wanted to take it in, say today, to get an inspection, I know that this car would not pass an emissions inspection if my state required it. Now, here's another way that that's really useful. If you're buying a used car and the car doesn't have a check engine light illuminated, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's nothing wrong with the car. The owner of that particular vehicle that you're looking at may have cleared codes from the car before trying to sell it to you. So what you do is that you plug this in and you hit that button right there, that ready test, or this button right here. So if I did this right now to a car that I was trying to buy, a used car, as soon as it finishes, it's telling me right off the bat that there are systems that are not ready. So I can easily tell by this that there's a possibility that codes may have been cleared from these systems. And because the codes were clear, the car's not showing me a check engine light. So now I can tell the owner of the car that I can't buy the car until all of those monitors are ready. This can potentially save you from buying a car that has some serious issues. If I go to live data, this will actually show me all of the sensor information that is being fed to the computer, and it's actually going to show me that information right on the OBD reader. That is super useful if you're trying to troubleshoot a car that has an issue and you have knowledge of what these parameters are supposed to be. Now obviously that's advanced. Your average weekend mechanic is probably not going to be able to decipher a lot of that data that I'm going to show you. If you want to know what any of these are, so these more obscure ones here, say IAT, hit the question mark, intake air temperature. So the scan tool will actually tell you what all of these parameters are. Not only can you view the live data, but you can actually also record the data. So if I hit record data, I can record a complete data set, or I can do a custom data set and pick the parameters I want. So if I have a car that has an intermittent issue, what I can do is I can record a complete data set like I just showed you when the car is okay. Then I can plug in the OBD reader, go back to here and hit the DTC trigger instead, so that it starts reading when a code is triggered. That's going to allow me to go back and compare the parameters when the car was healthy and after the code was triggered and see what changed. It's going to really clue me in as to what the problem might be if I don't know, if I'm trying to troubleshoot on my own. There are a few other features that you can mess around with, so be sure to read the manual thoroughly to get the most out of it. But this particular reader doesn't have support for ABS or SRS monitors, which are your anti-lock brakes and your airbag system. Neither of these are systems that an inexperienced mechanic should attempt to fix, but Autel reserved those features for their next reader in their lineup. The included DTC library is pretty comprehensive and expansive, but I do wish that it provided a little more information in terms of what could be causing the particular codes that it's reading. I think every vehicle owner should have a code reader in their arsenal, even if they don't work on their own cars. But if you enjoy tinkering and want to take your skills as a mechanic to the next level, this code reader right here will allow you to do that for a very reasonable price and also include features previously only available at repair shop. I do want to warn that the OBD code reader market has become saturated with cheap readers and dongles from unknown companies, so keep in mind that the OBD port is a two-way communication device and you can definitely harm your car by connecting imitation readers. So I would highly advise my audience to only purchase quality readers, even if you don't purchase this one, from a known company. But if you're interested in this particular model, the link to it along with a 20% discount code is in the video description. As always, thanks a lot for watching and take care.